good neighbor. Matthew 22, verse 39, and the second is likened to it. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. Miss Kelly, a dear departed neighbor, was a woman who really practiced what the above scripture reads. She was a quiet-spoken, humble woman of God. I met her and her husband when I first moved back to the neighborhood in 1987. Both of them enjoyed their yard, especially all the flowers and shrubbery they had planted over the years. Christmas morning in 1989 was especially beautiful here in South Georgia. It had snowed and the ground was covered. All the water pipes in my mobile home were frozen, so I went next door to my sister's house to take a bath. No one was home. They went to Mama's for Christmas dinner. I was supposed to meet my family there. I finished my bath and put on some warm clothes and went out the door. Across the road at the Kellys was an ambulance. I went over there. Mr. Kelly had taken sick. He and his family had celebrated both his birthday and Christmas. Before he died, I had the privilege of praying the last prayer for him. He finished celebrating Christmas in heaven. After this, Miss Kelly and I developed a deep friendship. She had 2 granddaughters she was raising, and she worked full-time despite her handicap. She had contracted polio when she was a youngster. She still cut her own grass and worked in her yard. The other neighbors and I would keep a close watch on her to see if we could be as assistants. If a big pecan limb fell on her yard, some of us neighbors would see it was cleaned up. Miss Kelly had a strong faith in God, and she did not like to call on others to help. Instead, she took her problems to the Lord and He would help her. Jesus particularly loved and cared for widows. She always appreciated her neighbors and would say, "Thank God for my good neighbors." I remember one time I carried her a mess of butternut squash, and she cooked me one of the best pies I ever tasted. She baked it out of love. That's what made it so good. In the year 2002, I noticed she was becoming frail and losing weight. She told me she was tired and wanted to rest. In a few months, she found out she had cancer, but she still didn't let that defeat her. After a few weeks in the hospital, she came back to her beautiful home where she wanted to be. In early July 2002, I dreamed I went over to see her. I looked in her bedroom, but she was not there. I woke from the dream and said, "Lord, you're about to bring Miss Kelly home, aren't you?" And the Lord replied, "Yes, her work on earth is about completed." I began to cry for her. A few days later, I went over to her house and had a good visit with her. She said, "Irvin, I want you to say the last prayer for me." A few days later, she went on to be with the Lord. At her gravesite, I had the privilege of praying the last prayer for her. She was a virtuous woman, one of strong character, graced by her humble, compassionate spirit. Every time I look at her house and see the flowers blooming, I thank the Lord I was her neighbor and she was a part of my life. Psalms 1:16 and 15. Precious in the sight of the Lord is the death of His saints.